There's just
Right.
something that life experience gives you, all that security, stability. It just gives you this gravitas to have just better conversations. It doesn't always have to be about your job, the weather, politics, current events. It can be about, what is the meaning of life, and actually have a real conversation about that, because you have lived experience and have lived a life and had struggles and overcome those struggles. And so you just get to have just a deeper connection, which again is something young guys find appealing, and actually, quite frankly, most guys find appealing.
Gary, today we're going to be talking about 10 reasons why men love older women. And let me say, the reason why women also tend to like younger men is because they age a heck of a lot better than men do. And they definitely statistically live a lot longer than men do. So it's actually kind of like a match made in heaven sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, those younger guys are going to have a little bit more staying power. Women particularly will take better care of themselves, generally speaking. Men are a little bit irresponsible in the personal self-care area. And so women tend to live a little bit longer.
Well, statistically speaking, I'm probably going to die before Jessica. I hate to say it, it's going to happen.
Yes.
That's just the reality of it. So if you're in the older crowd, we have a lot of clients who will be in their 60s, 70s and beyond and be like, these guys are so old. Like they're so old. And I want to push back a little bit, but then I look at the client, I'm like, damn, you look young. You look good. You've been taking care of yourself. So I hear it. So I think you're going to really enjoy this today. This is going to be a fun one.
Yeah. What I love about this one is we had a chance this past weekend to spend some time with our clients. We did the first ever Love Strategies live event. And it was, I don't know how you feel about it. I'm still buzzing from it. It's a couple days later. I'm still like walking on air from the whole experience.
It was like a crying fest. Everyone cried of tears of happiness. Gary and I were just like, that was an emotional roller coaster, man. Let me tell you, especially Sunday, because Saturday night we had a couple drinks with the clients. And then Sunday morning, it just became this total love fest. I'm like, I am emotionally drained. I can't handle any more love. It's too much. I'm not well slept. But it was a fantastic event. It was just for our highest end clients. It's for our Lux program. We don't talk a lot about it because we have a waiting list for it, and we only bring on a very select few number of clients, but it was very, very fun.
Yeah, but to me, my favorite event of the whole entire weekend was Saturday night.
Yes.
Before Saturday night, we had a whole live session about flirting and confidence and how to approach men and just how to have better interactions. And a lot of the women entered that session with a lot of doubt, a lot of just disbelief that this was even possible. And is it okay to go up to men who are older? Is it okay to go up to men who are younger? And we did it was a lot of hard work, like kind of recalibrating a lot of those beliefs. And then so we did that. Then everyone went and had dinner. And then we brought people back for what was, to me, the main event.
It was a social experiment. I wasn't sure if this was going to work. I've done this with men like 12 years ago when I used to coach men, which is get them out there talking to as many people as humanly possible. And I go to Gary a couple of weeks before the event. I'm like, I'm going to try this with the women. Let's see if this works. Because I didn't know. So I bought a trophy. The person who talked to the most guys that night wins the trophy. All right. Simple thing. Gary, what happened?
And so a lot of really great stuff happened. But, today on this particular podcast, we're talking about why men love older women. And one of our clients, who we won't name by name, she's around, I don't even actually know, 60-ish, give or take.
50s, 60s, yeah.
Ish. And at one point during the evening, I'm actually standing there talking to Adam's roommate. And we look over and Adam's roommate says, or downstairs neighbor.
He's not my roommate. I was like, he's not like a college kid. He lives in my building.
He's top bunk, Adam's bottom bunk.
Basically. Like, Gary, I'm not in college, bro.
So we look over and he goes, your client is talking to that guy's young. I look over and I'm like, yeah, she is. That's exactly what we taught them. Like, talk to everybody. Like, why not?
Yeah.
And so I could only see the guy's face. And I want to say the guy was like 37 plus or minus a year or two. Um, and I don't know. I was too far away to know what she said or how, but I saw how she carried herself. But I could see his face, and he was just eating it up, and hanging
Enamored.
on every word and just loving it. And so I, like Adam, retired early, went to bed. And it turns out our client got this guy's number that night.
Yeah. Yeah.
30 years younger, this
They were
guy.
holding hands. And look,
Mhm.
it's not going to be a match made in heaven. That is a much larger gap than we would recommend.
Right.
But just breaking through some of these belief systems about men only want younger women, I think that's the big belief system that we need to break through right now. Because if we're carrying around that belief system and we're in the older age bracket, then suddenly we have no empowerment here.
Right.
And just our experience has shown that this is not the case necessarily, and that there are a number of men who do love women who are much more mature, which is a wonderful thing. So,
Yeah.
and I think that there's a lot of research that supports this, isn't there, Gary?
Yeah. I mean, evolutionary psych just kind of shows over and over again that there is this pairing of older, successful, resource rich men with younger, attractive women. And that's there is a lot of support for that. There's
Sure.
also a lot of reasons why that dynamic exists, and oftentimes it has a lot more to do with power than just maleness and femaleness. And I think what's important about that research is it doesn't show the whole story, and it dramatically oversimplifies relationships, particularly in a way that's harmful to successful women.
Sure.
The fact is, younger women really do date and are very interested in older women. A little nerd alert, if you want to know the official term for this, and maybe you don't, maybe you could probably live a long, happy life without knowing this term, but it's
Give it
called
to me.
age hypogamy. And that's
Ooh,
so any relationship where the woman is older than the man.
got it. I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
Interesting. So walk us through some of the stats, nerd alert. We need to have a sound. Maybe our editor Jamila can do like a dun, 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 like a nerd alert moment for every time Gary nerds out.
It should be like a little kazoo, like zzz.
Yeah. Okay. Go through them for us.
All right. So it turned, I did some digging to find some stats on this just because, like how often does this really happen? And is this something that is of any interest? And so it turns out 34% of women aged 40 to 60 have dated a younger man. So one out
Mhm.
of three women have actually done this. 56% of women, so over half, would consider engaging in a relationship with a younger man. And that's a good call on their part because we also see in the data that 81% of women in relationships with younger men report high levels of relationship satisfaction. So when
Mm.
women end up with younger men, 8 out of 10, I mean, that's a high number, report very high relationship satisfaction. Younger men, when they're married to older women, are less likely to get divorced. So it's good for the guys too. And 71% of individuals believe that love is more important than age. And I
Right.
think I ended with that one specifically because I do think that is one of the overarching messages that we want to have here today in this podcast is age is easy to focus on because it's one of the first numbers you see when you look at an online dating profile. It's one of the most common questions asked somebody like, how old are you? And so then we have that number just kind of lingering in our minds and we
Right.
give it just a little too much credit because really age is just the number of trips around the sun you've taken in a lifetime. Beyond that, there's a lot more factors that are a lot more important to your actual relationship fulfillment.
Yeah. And this past weekend, I did a presentation on men in general. It's just a pretty overall presentation about my experience of coaching men. And I was explaining that men don't necessarily want to date younger women, even though society talks about this. And there was a breakthrough study in Finland that showed that a decent proportion of men would be open to dating younger women. Some of those guys really want to date younger women, but in practice, they typically marry and date women that are their own age. And my own hypothesis of this, I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of a guy who is divorced. Let's say I'm 45. Yeah, okay, I'm going to get divorced. I'm going to get out there, start dating. I might talk to a woman who's 25, and that'll be fun and playful. But then as I start to get to know her, I'll be like, we are on just different levels, not in like a negative way. Not I'm saying I'm a higher level, we're just on a different plane, like emotional field. You know, when you're 25, you're going out, you're hanging out, playing with your friends, you're hanging with your friends, you're doing social media, all of that stuff. And it just wouldn't be of interest to me. So I guarantee my personal journey would be I'd probably go on a couple days with women who are in their late 20s, maybe even early 30s. But then ultimately, I would be moving, and as well as women that are in my own age group, but the women I would actually connect with who are just at the same point in their life, the same season of life, those would be the ones that I would marry. That's the one that I would remarry with. So I think it's a very important thing to keep in mind.
You said something really important there. The ones I connect with. And that's really what ultimately this is going to come down to, is who do you connect with? And I would say, I'm sure there are some of you listening to this thinking, no way. Guys do not want older women, right? And so here's the other side of this. Here's what younger guys don't want, right? And so when you say they don't want older women, here's what they actually don't want. It has nothing to do with the numerical age. They don't want somebody who's an old curmudgeonly complainer, who doesn't want to do anything, who's closed-minded, highly opinionated. They don't want a low-energy homebody who's in bed every night by 8 p.m., right?
Yeah,
they don't want
like
somebody...
me.
I wasn't going to out you, but you're welcome to out yourself.
That's me. Bed by 8 every night. This past weekend, I had a few clients come up to me and say, Adam, it's your bedtime. You're past your bedtime. We talked a lot about sleep this weekend, and I appreciated that.
And so many more of them stayed up later than you.
Oh my God, yes.
And, so it just goes to show, like, it's not an age thing, but, what it really comes down to is that connection. And so we just don't want somebody who's drastically different from us with nothing in common. And it's not just guys who don't want those things. Nobody wants those things.
Nobody.
Right. And so, it's helpful to realize there's tons of reasons why guys would consider and are open to and quite eager to date older women.
And I want to be cautious because I'm sure there are some younger women listening, but I'm about to talk a little bit about why it is that guys necessarily don't want to date younger women. And I'm going to paint with a very broad stroke, but this is worth mentioning and worth thinking about. Even if you are younger, remember, age is just a number. So typically when men date down significantly in age, they're dating women who tend to be maybe a little bit more shallow, who might be a little bit more image obsessed. They're not interested in being an Instagram boyfriend, all right, and getting tagged on Instagram and be like, oh my God, look, I'm on Instagram on my boat with my new boyfriend who's 30 years older than me. And also, one thing I've noticed is that as you get older, you stop caring what people think about you, and younger people tend to care a lot about what others think. And so if you're dating down in age, as a guy, you're dating a woman who's much younger, she cares a lot about what other people think. It's just they don't have even a clear direction in their life at that point, which is totally understandable. And they don't also, I think the big thing is they don't know who they are yet. They're not established. Their life can be quite unpredictable, which all of this can lead to a huge amount of neediness, honestly, in the relationship. When you're in a different season of life, it can be, a person who is much younger might be looking for a lot more, might bring a lot of that like pick me needy energy than someone who's a little bit older. So all of these things just to keep in mind. If I were a guy and I was single and I was much older, dating down in age, these would be the things that I'd be like, I don't know if that would be right for me.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out, as you did, that all those traits aren't desirable. And it's not just younger people that have those traits. It's not just women, it's men too. It's people of all ages. We don't like needy. We don't like shallow. We don't like people who care too much what they think. And we don't like people who don't really know who they are as a person. And so it's just one of those things that when older men think of dating younger, these are the most common things that they'll mention that is a barrier for them.
And I don't want, I also, just because I want to be cautious with what I'm about to say, but I think of the men who are in their 60s and 70s who end up marrying a woman who's in their 20s and 30s. And I find, generally speaking, and this might just be my own preconception, those men tend to be very shallow themselves. Like the types of men who do that with that big of a gap, they don't care about the emotional connection. They just want to have the arm candy. It's kind of a shallow relationship. Same with the woman. If she's 25, 30 and dating a man who's in his 70s, come on.
Yeah.
Come on. Both sides. It's ludicrous. It's just
Yeah.
ludicrous to think that there's any real, first off, physical connection. I mean, certainly for him going to her, there would be, but her going up, come on. And then secondly, emotional connection. It's just ludicrous.
Yeah.
Completely different stages of life.
I think it's important to point out too that some of those really large age gap things that you're talking about, those are outlier cases. Those are extremely rare, but when they do happen, they're very, very noticeable. So we almost
Yeah.
notice them too much and think that kind of stuff's going on too much, and it just really isn't. It just when it does happen, we're all like, oh, look at that,
It's
like
fun
that.
gossip. It's
Yeah,
fun.
it's super fun. Um, and so, I think that in the big picture of all this, what it's really important to remember is that guys are goal oriented. They don't want to waste their time. And so there's a certain lack of efficiency when you're dating somebody who's younger and not that similar to you. And so the benefit then is as a guy, if you know what you want, you have a clear direction, you want to be time efficient about these things, dating somebody older, they tend to have a lot of the characteristics that you're looking for, more so than the younger women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So why don't we get into the 10 reasons? And again, the goal of this is to reframe some of those beliefs for some of those clients who are thinking to themselves, well, society has always told me that men want to date younger women. So therefore, I'm screwed. There's no way I'm going to find love. So I'm going to go into the first one. First reason why it is that guys really do date up and are attracted to older women is that older women tend to know who they are. They have this level of what I might call like established confidence. You get to a stage in life where it's like you are who you are and it probably isn't changing. And you get just a lot more comfortable in your own skin. And for those who might not be comfortable in their own skin and a little bit older and you're saying, well, that's not quite me. I guarantee the way you show up now is much more established than it did even 20 years ago. So just by living longer on planet Earth, you just are a lot more established, which is incredibly attractive when we're getting out there and dating.
Yeah. And, I think with all of these 10 reasons, it's important, we're talking about this in the context of, older women and younger men, but a lot of this is kind of, you're going to hear some of the things we talk about, and it's going to remind you of good qualities you have that maybe you weren't valuing nearly enough. It's like, oh
Right.
yeah, I do have that. And, it gives you some more things to emphasize, out when you're dating too. And very much related to the established confidence. Actually, the next two really, number two, older women, they tend to know what they want. They have clear direction. It's not wishy-washy. I don't know. It's not indecisive. They have a goal. They're ambitious. They're going very directly, without much hesitation. And it's just knowing what you want makes you a lot more efficient. Very much related to that is number three, which is she's her own person. She has a clarity about who she is. She knows what her life is about. She knows where her life is going. She knows what her identity is in that life. And she also knows that there's more to her life and her identity than her relationship. She has other things going on. And so the real benefit of that to younger guys and really to any guy is that she's not needy or overly focused on him. She's got a life and she's got a full, complete, amazing life. And so that both of you can lead those full, complete, amazing lives, share them with each other, and actually achieve what we like to call relationship synergy.
Yeah, I love it. And all of this, all of those points we just mentioned so far leads to this fourth point is that typically women in their older season of life tend to be much more just stable and dependable. When we think about relationships in a healthy relationship, it really is just a partnership. It's a team. It's two people getting together and saying, let's do life together. And there's nothing more difficult in life than trying to go through it with someone who is not dependable, who is not stable, who you wake up every morning and you're like, oh God, what am I working with today? Right. And it's just a different human being. And so I just think as you get older, you do become more stable, you become more dependable. You are much more emotionally regulated, tend to be at least. And it's just a much more predictable lifestyle. And for those guys who do want that partnership, who do want that long-term relationship, for those guys who are good guys who just want a good relationship, this is a huge plus.
Right. Yeah. And I think, with a lot of these, kind of to my earlier point, there's a lot of things that women have and bring to the table that just because that is who they are, they almost take them for granted and don't realize these are things that guys are looking for. And I think the next two at least fit into that category, which is number 5 is just fewer insecurities and self-doubt, right? If you think any woman listening to this, if you think about the person you were 10 years ago and how many insecurities and how much self-doubt you had 10 years ago versus now, you have less, right? You're just more sure of yourself. You have less self doubt. It kind of goes back to some of the other ones. You know who you are as a person, which also brings us to number 6, which is the ability to have deeper and more meaningful conversations. There's just something that life experience gives you. All that security, stability, it just gives you this gravitas to have just better conversations. It doesn't always have to be about your job, the weather, politics, current events. It can be about, what is the meaning of life, and actually have a real conversation about that because you have lived experience and have lived a life and had struggles and overcome those struggles. And so you just get to have just a deeper connection, which again is something young guys find appealing. And actually, quite frankly, most guys find appealing.
Yeah. I've found that every year that my hair gets grayer, my conversations get deeper. That's it. I mean, I just don't have time for small talk nowadays. It's not that I don't have time. Oh God, it's like growing up, my father was this way. Like I would see him at events or family parties and things. And if someone's talking about something meaningless, you could see the look on his face where he's doing this and then he'd look off. And I would always look at that. My dad, just do better at pretending you're listening. But Jessica always calls me out now. She's like, you're doing that thing where I'm just like, oh God, I don't have time. I can't do it. It's like, if it doesn't actually have any meaning, if it doesn't go a little bit deeper, and it doesn't have to be like, what is the meaning of life? What is talking about religions? It doesn't have to be that deep, but it's got to be something more substantial. And when you're dating your 20s, what do people talk about? TikTok, Instagram, you name it. I don't know what kids are talking about these days, Gen Zers, but certainly in the older crowd, you just don't have the same tolerance for those things.
Yeah. And those high quality younger guys, they want deeper, meaningful conversations. And again, I don't know what our client did to land this 37-year-old guy at our event Saturday night, but I suspect it had a lot to do with this because that particular client has just amazing life experience, very worldly, super interesting. Friday night we had dinner together. I talked to her almost the entire time. It's just mind-blowing, just so incredibly interesting. And it's just a conversation you just don't get with a younger person. It's impossible because they don't have enough, lived experience.
Well, you did an exercise with all of our clients that were there. And one of them was for them to just brag about themselves because women aren't necessarily as forward to brag about themselves as men are. And man, they went around the table and I was mind blown. One woman spoke like 5 languages. Another woman, I can't get into any details because we have confidentiality, but it blew my brain. I'm like, I want to have a long, deep conversation with every single one of you. And it's just due to a longer lived experience. And there's a lot to that for sure.
Yeah. And, do you want to do the next one? Or you want me to do the next one?
Yeah, I want to do the next one.
Okay.
The
next one
did. Would be greater sexual maturity. I'm trying to think of the movie when, Gary, I hope you know the name of it, where there's the MILF. Do you remember that movie?
The Graduate?
No, there's the, I'm going to have to Google it, the MILF movie. Sorry, everybody. This is
That's
me
going to be
going
an
off
interesting
the
search. It's going to be an interesting.
Oh my God. All right. I'm going to have to come back to this.
American Pie?
American Pie. Yes.
This brings me back, by the way. Just a slight tangent. I used to work at a video store back in the 1900s, and this was every day of my life. People would come in, you're like, that movie? And they give like one random detail, and I felt like it was on a game show to see if I could pick it. And if you do, you get the exact same reaction Adam just gave, which is like, yes! Yeah! You did it! You win!
And that was definitely pre-Google because you're ancient, Gary. Speaking of old. So, No, but you just think of that movie with the older, more mature woman who has a lot of sexual experience. She's very comfortable with herself. And it's something as you get older, it's important to be with someone who is just a little bit, and it's not to say that all older women are completely comfortable with their own sexuality. Certainly not. But there is a certain difference between a woman who is much, much younger, who's not quite there yet. They're not quite as experienced. Just, again, lived experience, having sex. There's a lot there. And as you get older, you tend to just have a lot more comfort with men. What is that they like? What is that they don't like? And just honestly, a bit more of an open-minded experience when it comes to your sexuality as well.
Yeah, and the thing that older women kind of stereotypically get right about this is they're just not going to sit back and passively hope that the guy figures it all out, right? Yeah. They're going to be a little bit more directive. And this is true for everybody. You want to have better sex, have better sexual communication, right? It's a little left, it's a little right, it's a little fast, a little slow. Oh, okay, good, right? It's all that stuff.
oh, good. Love
okay,
it.
Good.
Love it.
But they're going to get you where they need to go. They're going to get you where you need to go. And it's because there's a comfort level with having those conversations where when you're younger, it's, oh gosh, I hope he figures this out. Is he going to, oh gosh. And you have to suffer through a lot of bad sexual encounters before maybe you start feeling comfortable enough to be like, dude, that thing with the elbow is weird. Stop doing that. Or whatever it happens to be.
Oh,
whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, I think that as you get older, there's just less shame when it comes to sex. You're just, when you're younger, you're still dealing with your parental upbringing of all the negative connotations we've been given about sex. And as you get older, you're like, no, sex is great. Let's go for it. Let's enjoy it. And I know what it is that I like, and I definitely know what it is that I don't like. So I set boundaries every step of the way.
Yeah. And so, that brings us to our 8th reason, which is inner and outer beauty, right? Beauty is such a omnipresent kind of thing. I mean, there's a holistic version of it, and it's not just the outside superficial, but it's the inner beauty of just being a good, authentic, kind, and warm person. And that's something that is rare. I think rarer in younger people. Just because when you're younger, you're trying so hard to impress people, and kindness and warmth isn't generally as overtly impressive. It's a more
rewarding.
Rewarding, right? Right. It's subtle. And, when I don't know, early in your life, it's like, confidence and like showy. And as you age, it's like, like you'll see, like you're just going to, it's how people feel when they're around you. And I think that inner beauty aspect is really appealing because it's rare, when people are younger.
Yeah. I mean, what's the number one trait people look for in a partner? It's kindness, someone who's really kind. And when we're younger, I mean, I think back to myself, my early 20s, there were probably many moments where I was being unkind just to try to be cool. Yep. And if I could go back there and slap myself across the face and like, dude, grow up, I would, but I can't. And so you mature and you realize, how to build real relationships. So I think that's really important. The next one is that as you get older, I think our ability our willingness to deal with playing games in relationships, it just goes way down. Game playing is not something people are wanting to do. And there's a lot less drama later in life, a lot less gossiping, a lot more, although Jess has been watching The Real Housewives lately, and maybe there's some caveats to this, but it tends to be a little bit less petty because I think as we just get older, as we get grayer, as we get closer to the end of our life, we look at the things that really matter, the deep and meaningful connections, and the little things are just that. They're little things. They're just silly.
Yeah, there's less, or fewer manufactured problems. I think when you're older, you get much better at something I talk about in the relationship synergy program, which is 5-5-5. Is this going to matter in 5 minutes? Is this going to matter in 5 months? Or is this going to matter in 5 years? And you realize very quickly that some things will matter in 5 minutes, but almost nothing matters really in 5 months or 5 years. What did she say? What did I think she meant? What did he say? Whatever. It just doesn't matter. Right. And so, that's nice because no one wants to waste time on that stuff. No. And so that brings us to the 10th one. And I saved this 10th one for the grand finale, because I think this is probably the most important point. And if you take one thing away from this podcast today, it's this point. It's really not about age. It's much more about youthfulness. So it doesn't matter if you're 45 or 65. We like youthful energy, particularly while dating. We want
Mhm.
someone who's young, vibrant, energized. And I just said young, but I don't mean young in age. I mean young in heart. And
Yeah.
so we like to spend time, and we are attracted to, magnetized to, however you want to think about it, to people who just are positive. They're smiling. They have high energy. We want to be around those kind of people. And I know, from working with clients, there are some people who are 35 that seem 85, right? And we have
Yeah.
clients, lots of them, who are 70, 75. And oh my gosh, I sometimes am intimidated, because I'm like, these women could do circles around me. Like, they're just so full of energy and enthusiasm, and they're doing all these things. And it's like, that's
Yeah.
what you want. Youthfulness.
And it's youthfulness is something that you can trigger at any time. And we saw it with our very own eyes that
Mm-hmm.
Saturday night, because
Mm-hmm.
these are the top executives. They run the world. These are some of the most
Yes.
powerful women on the planet. And they haven't had this playful side to them in a while. Within an hour, they
Mm-hmm.
were living it up, curious, laughing, giggling, going around, having the greatest time of their life. And they're like, oh my God, they talked to every single guy within like a 500-foot radius of the venue. I mean, they were running around. The experiment worked, and they just leaned into it. So I think for all of you who are struggling in this area, just realize that this is totally within your control. Energy is something that you can always convey in your love life, and you can decide to make that change at any time. And the thing is, with all of this, the guys who really like all of these traits are the older, successful guys, or guys who want that stable, long-term relationship. And younger men are drawn to this in general. So for those who are getting out there and dating, if you're in the older age bracket, we've talked a lot about, potentially considering younger guys. I'm all about it. The only caveat to all this, I'll end this with the bonus, is that we here at Love Strategies recommend dating no further out than plus or minus 10 years. So if you're 55, go as low as 45 or up as high as 65. You can do the math on any age group. That's generally what we recommend, because if you go much further out than that, you tend to be in very different seasons of life. So if you are ready, get out there, start applying some of these principles. You can do this. Right, Gary?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you all so much. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.